Hello and welcome to ITC presents Swabhiman Bharat Indiathon, an initiative brought to you by Network18. Over the course of the next 2 hours, we'll deliberate with India's top policy makers, corporate icons, thought leaders and influencers and understand their vision for a Swabhiman Bharat. We begin the Indiathon by laying out how the vision of a Swabhiman Bharat can be turned into a mission. What's the government's roadmap for achieving a $5 trillion Aatmanirbhar Bharat economy? What's the best way for the public-private partnership model to boost India's economy? This opening session is set to be an eye-opener on the government's roadmap to create an Aatmanirbhar India and how initiatives like Swabhiman Bharat are essential to complement the efforts made towards achieving it. CNN News 18's managing editor Zaka Jacob in conversation with Union Minister Nitin Gadkari on what's his vision for a Swabhiman Bharat built on the principles of self-reliance and self-sufficiency.
Hello and welcome to this special broadcast. It's a Network 18 campaign, Swabhiman Bharat, the biggest of its kind, to try and promote the idea of an Aatmanirbhar Bharat, or a self-reliant, a self-dependent India, something that the Prime Minister announced in the middle of the lockdown. But how do we actually translate that vision into action? Through Swabhiman Bharat, we'll be speaking to leading lights in industry, veterans of various sectors in industry. We'll also be speaking to economists, thinkers, philosophers, politicians, all of whom will give their vision for how an Aatmanirbhar Bharat can be achieved, how a self-reliant, a self-dependent India can be achieved. After all, India still depends a great deal on global supply chains for its imports and for many manufactured goods. How do we also make Indian industry more competitive so that the global supply chains, which have been disrupted because of COVID and other reasons in this year, can be taken advantage of by our own domestic industry? Our first special guest in this Swabhiman Bharat series, this campaign that we're running here at Network 18, is the Union Minister for Highways and Road Transport and also the Union Minister for MSMEs, Nitin Gadkari. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. So we know the Prime Minister's vision of Aatmanirbhar Bharat, or a self-reliant India, which he outlined in one of the major speeches during the lockdown. What does that, though, mean in the context of the ministry that you're heading, in the context of micro, small and medium enterprises? How are you going to transform them? How are you going to make our small and medium enterprises more self-dependent, more Swabhiman and more Aatmanirbhar?
Actually, we want to make India as a #1 global economy. I'm just giving an example of automobile sector. The sector is of 4,50,000 crore, which is giving maximum employment potential. Yes. So now we are going for changing the technology: electric car, ethanol, methanol, biodiesel, bio-CNG, electric, hydrogen fuel cell, by which 100% I'm confident in 5 years, India will become a #1 manufacturing hub of automobile. All world reputed brands are already present in India. So exactly the way in which this sector is going to create good exports. So Aatmanirbhar Bharat concept is that we need to create more export and reduce your import. And reduce import, we need to develop new technology, new innovation research. Only in the, I will tell you one thing, that the knowledge is the power. Yeah. The innovation, entrepreneurship, science, technology, research, skill, and successful practices, we name it as a knowledge, and conversion of knowledge into wealth is the future for the country. And exactly that is our policy. Upgradation of technology, getting low-cost capital, increase the export, reduce the import, and create jobs to the Indian youth. India is a country where you have the maximum young, talented engineering manpower in the whole world. Is #1 is India. Correct. So we can take it. Raw materials are available. Law and order situation is very good. The laws are very, very friendly for development. And 100% the world is now keenly interested to deal with India. Majority of the world communities now, they are not very much interested to deal with China. In yes. a situation, it is a global opportunity for Indian industry, MSMEs, to create good, using good technology without compromise with the quality. By reducing the cost and improve the quality, we have to capture international market. And that is exactly we are trying to reduce our logistic cost, labor cost, power cost, and we want to make good quality, and by which we want to capture export market. So by which we can make India Aatmanirbhar Bharat, we can eradicate the poverty and create more jobs to the people of the country.
So one of the things, Mr. Gadkari, that we've seen because of the lockdown, because of COVID really, as well as some other reasons, is that most countries around the world which import manufactured goods are reluctant to do business with China. There are various suspicions around that. I won't go into that. But many countries want to move their supply chains away from China. We've seen that with Japan. We've seen that with some of the Southeast Asian countries as well. The question, though, is how does India take advantage of that particular mood right now in the global manufacturing industry and become possibly, if not a replacement to China, but certainly take a slice of that manufacturing pie away from China?
COVID-19 was a big problem. So now the situation is changed. As per the GDP growth for this quarter is very positive, and today we are now on increasing trend. So I'm confident that we will fight with this COVID-19 and we will win over this war. At the same time, we will win the economic war also, and 100% we will march ahead towards global, making India as a #1 global economy in the world.
You've also spoken recently about, strengthening domestic industry. You spoke, in fact, to an industry a few days ago, saying that we should also start looking for indigenous products to try and replace imports, Swadeshi products to replace imports or substitute for imports. How do you, though, balance that, Mr. Minister? How do you ensure that this does not become a word, Swadeshi does not become a word for import substitution as we used to have it before 1991, before the era of liberalization?
Actually, made in India and startup, stand up, make in India is very important. We have got all capability. We have to develop our technology. At the same time, if the technology is not available, we can make joint venture with the international companies also. We can upgrade the technology. And I am confident by designing, by using new technology, innovations and research, we can be more competitive. So the way in which we have to make India strong, for the reason we need whatever the need for that, we have to adopt that. On the basis of that, we can develop. The software is an example where in the whole world is engineers, software engineers are dominating. So the way for textile, for automobile, chemical industry, pharmaceutical industries, we are doing good jobs. We are making good export in pharmaceuticals. Now handloom, handicrafts, we are making this khadi denim is now it is used by American company for making jean pants. Yes. So there is a huge potential in India where we can make it, and we can got the all potentials and capabilities by which we can 100% satisfy the demand of international market with good quality and good cost.
Now, one of the things that small and medium enterprises in particular that they talk about is access to capital. They find it difficult to access bank credit. Banks anyway are reluctant to lend because of legacy issues, because of the NPA problem, which we've had for many years now. In fact, you just announced a few months ago, the government had announced, the finance minister had announced this 3 lakh crore MSME package for loans without collateral. Can you give us an update on where we are right now? How much of that money has been sanctioned? How much of that money has been disbursed? What is the status of that?
We have sanctioned 3 lakh crores of capital to MSME, out of which I'm giving the information that 81 lakh industries, and we have sanctioned the 2 lakh crore, and 1 lakh 60,000 crore is already disbursed. So then we are making fund of fund also 20,000 crore, where those MSME who are doing excellent job, having good bank track record, GST record, and also income tax record, we are on the basis of that, we will make their rating, and we will support them to raise the capital into the capital market, out of which whatever the capital they are going to raise, 15% will be contribution we will give to them. Then we are already restructure lakhs of MSMEs, and we are trying to help them. So I'm confident that because of this all support from the government, 100% the MSMEs are doing excellent job. There are some problems because the MSMEs are not getting their payment from state government, central government and undertakings, then from the major industry. Some problems are there, but I always tell to the people that there are some people who convert problems into opportunities, and there are some people who convert opportunities into the problems. So let us accept problems as a challenge and go ahead.
One other thing that concerns Indian industry, and particularly the smaller ones, are more affected by, than the bigger ones, because you mentioned opportunities and problems. And since you're also the Minister for Highways and Transport, one of the things that industry keeps talking about is the infrastructure deficit, that we need to build our highways, we need to build our airports and our ports, our connectivity, our interlinkages, all the way from factory to port of export. How do you plan to improve on that, the infrastructure deficit? How do you plan to bridge that?
I feel that the water, power, transport and communication, without that we cannot develop industry. We cannot develop agriculture. Water, power, transport and communication. Now, I don't want to elaborate anything. My suggestion to you, you go into any state of India and you ask question to anybody, belong to opposition party also. You just ask him how much road construction is going on. The people will give the answer of this question. Total India is now reforming into a international standard of good infrastructure, express highway, access control highway, cement concrete road, good connectivity to ports, airports, or everywhere you can see it. I just telling you that when I was Minister for Shipping, Port and Inland Waterways, I was talking about Ganga waterways.
Yes.
People were laughing to me. Some of my friend was telling me why you are talking, it never happened. Now the Ganga waterway is open from Varanasi to Haldia. Now it is open from Allahabad to Varanasi. And even after Bengal Sea, from Brahmaputra dredging is completed, already started. The RoPax has started. The water transport has started. Sea transport has started. The MPBS seaplane in Gujarat for Vallabhbhai Patel statue, it is already started. So the way in which it is changing, it is really I really can claim that last 50 years, whatever the work was done in infrastructure, compared with this 6 year, we have worked more work than that. That is the real example of our success story.
All right, and one final word, sir, about public-private partnerships. Even in your own case, in your own ministry, in highways, in building national highways, for example, this has been one of the most successful public-private partnership examples that we've seen. What is your vision, though, on private participation and for private players and their place in this larger vision of an Aatmanirbhar or a Swabhiman Bharat?
The last 5 years in my whole ministry, shipping, ports, Ganga, waterways, then road sector, my total works awarded in my ministry was 17 lakh crore. My budget for shipping ministry was 800 crore per year. Then 5 years it come to 4,000 crore. But we sanctioned Sagarmala project of 16 lakh crore, and out of which 6 lakh crore works have already completed. And now works are going on. Even in the road sector, we have completed at least more than 9 to 10 lakh crore works have completed. So my suggestion is, whatever we have claimed, everything is with you. You go and verify. And now my target is to at least make road construction of 111 lakh crore in 5 years, infrastructure, target given by the Prime Minister. And 100% we will contribute 45 to 50 lakhs crore we will invest in road sector. And already it's a successful example.
Yes.
My NHI income, previously last year it was 24,000 crore. After COVID also, this year up to the end of March, it will be 34,000 crore. And within 5 years, it will be 1 lakh crore. And we have a different type of models, TOT model, trust, already all type of models are there. And we are raising funds from the capital market. Response is good. 100% public-private investment will be involved. If the 1 lakh crore is from the government, we will take at least 6 to 7 lakh crore from the private sector, and we will complete the works. This is confidence which I am giving to you.
All right, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, Minister for Road Transport and MSMEs, thank you so much for speaking with us in this special broadcast, Swabhiman Bharat.
That was Union Minister Nitin Gadkari talking about the importance of large infrastructure projects that are completed on time, paving the way for an Aatmanirbhar India. Now, leaders of corporate India are an important source of inspiration for millions of Indians. This session features those who have created Indian companies, products and brands that resonate with every Indian and have attained global fame and recognition. The session will highlight how India's quest for self-sufficiency or Aatmanirbharta can take a cue from their success. How did they turn their dreams and ambitions into realities? And what made them who they are? We have CNBC TV 18's Mangla Malu in conversation with them on their mantras for excellence in leadership, their views on the path to self-reliance and their vision of a Swabhiman Bharat.
Hello and welcome. You're watching ITC presents Swabhiman Bharat Indiathon. Remember, it's an initiative by Network18. We're here to discuss an extremely important aspect of Swabhiman Bharat with an extremely elite list of panelists who I call the industry captains. They're the leaders of corporate India who are an important source of inspiration for millions of Indians. This session features those who have created Indian companies, products and brands that not only resonate with every Indian, but they have also attained global fame and recognition. How did they turn their dreams and ambitions into reality? What guiding philosophies in life made them inspirational business leaders? Well, that's the answer that we're looking from. Joining me today are Sanjeev Puri, Chairman and MD of ITC, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, Joint MD of Apollo Hospitals, and Dr. Pawan Goenka, the MD and CEO of Mahindra & Mahindra. Thanks a lot, gentlemen and lady, for joining in. And that exactly is the first question that we want to know. What does it take to make a great brand in India? Is India any different? We'll go with ladies first. Dr. Reddy.
So hello, and first thank you for putting together this wonderful thought process of the pride of the country. I think that to really build a brand, first you need to answer a long felt need or to fulfill a need or a requirement, and that's what we did at Apollo. When we started in 1983, most patients needed to go abroad for high quality surgery. We reversed the brain drain, brought doctors back, created infrastructure. So, first it's about answering the need. Second, I think that it's very important to not just have the right talent and the infrastructure, but to build trust. And I think it's on these three pillars that we have built one of the most trusted brands in healthcare. The final thing I think is that you can't take anything for granted in this sector or in the world at large, because everything is changing. So the ability to innovate, continue to refresh yourself, stay close to the customer, understand their changing and evolving needs, and continue to fulfill them. And that's what it takes.
All right. Interesting thoughts there. Dr. Goenka, your thoughts, because Mahindra & Mahindra, for as long as one can remember, has been one of the strongest brands in India. How did you all do it in India? How difficult was it? And now you are moving outside as well.
Well, thank you for organizing this. So first of all, I agree with everything that Sangeeta has said, and these are prerequisites for building a brand. And in the industry that we are in, and same is true for healthcare, of course, is building the trust of the component, of the customer. That is the most important. And in some sense, more critical the product or service is to your livelihood or to your life, more trust is required in that brand for consumers to embrace that brand. What I would also like to say is that in the modern times, there are few more things that are becoming important for building the brand and sustaining the brand. One of which is sharpness and focus on the brand. I think the days of a brand could stand for many things, many products, many services are probably going to be harder to sort of make happen. And we need to sharply focus the brand. And as you would have seen that Mahindra & Mahindra also has been talking about how we want to focus our brand on the core of a business more sharply. And one more thing that I would like to add is that the new age consumers give value also to what the brand or the company behind the brand stands for. What is the meaning of the brand? What does it mean to the society? What does it mean to the environment? What does it even mean to humanity? So building brand has perhaps become even more complex and sustaining it is even more difficult than what it used to be, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And clearly for success of any product or any service, building a very strong brand is a must.
Their trust, sharpness and purpose are the three things that we found out so far in what it takes to make a strong brand. But our next panelist has made a lot of them. We've heard of ITC, Aashirwad, we've heard of Wills, there is Bingo, there is Sunfeast. Why just that? Even Bukhara, the restaurant in itself, is a brand. Mr. Puri, your thoughts? We have trust, we have purpose, and we have a lot of other things that make India, make a strong brand in India. You need to be sharp as well. What are your thoughts on this?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. And I'm delighted to actually be answering this question, because this is something that is close to our heart in ITC and close to my heart. I, in fact, really dream of a day when, we travel overseas and we find the retail landscapes dominated by world-class Indian brands. Now, I completely agree with the points that have been made earlier. Well, I would say, I would just like to add to it that based on insights, and when we're talking about insights, we need to recognize that India is not one. We are really talking about many Indias when we are particularly talking about FMCG and food brands. And from our perspective, it's also been a role of a challenger because we are a relatively younger player. So the important thing is to find out, based on consumer insights, what is the distinct position that we can occupy and what is the distinct need of the consumer that we can meet. And to give you some examples, when we created Sunfeast Dark Fantasy Choco Fills, that was a unique biscuit. It never existed in India. It was a cookie filled with a chocolate. When we created Yippee noodles. Now, that was the first noodles with the round block, non-sticky noodles, all based on deep consumer insights. And you spoke about Aashirwad. Now, we do recognize that the tastes in India are different. So the Aashirwad product that you buy in each area is customized to the local taste and preferences. If you go to our hotels, the sambar that you will have in the ITC Grand Chola and the sambar that you'll have at ITC Moria, they'll be quite different. And therefore, we have to recognize that, and we have to build the apparatus and the infrastructure to be able to do it. And in our case, I think the learning has been the advantage of having a strong agri backend that we can have farm gate traceability, the advantage of having hotels where the chefs who understand the cuisines also contribute to the formulation of the products, besides the capability in our life sciences and technology center, as also, the brand building skills. All of this actually come together in a synergistic fashion to create a world-class Indian brands.
Fair point. So far what we have is we need trust. There should be sharpness in the brand. There has to be some purpose. And what Mr. Puri said, there has to be differentiation as well, because India is a diverse country. So while it has to have all these things, as a country, India is also a little tough in terms of terrain to operate in. Mr. Puri, you are, in a business which has a lot of regulatory challenges as well. How do you navigate through those challenges, and what has made you, stay resilient through all of that has happened?
Well, Mangalam, change is a way of life. Change has been driven by multiple factors, right from technology to consumer preferences to competition to regulation to geopolitics, as also internal aspiration. So in a way, change is a way of life, and organizations need to learn to and adapt to change as they occur. And I believe that there are two or three things that stand us in good measure as we adopt to the changes, or to use the current buzzword, the new normals that they arise. One is, you need to be constantly a learning organization. You need to constantly listen to the voices of various stakeholders and various news that comes in and adapt to that. It is, ultimately, there are the undercurrents of the yesterday that actually become important trends or important pillars of regulation in future. So one has to be a learning organization and deal with them in a systematic fashion. And second is that one needs to constantly have sustained investment in developing intellectual capacity, in capacity to innovate, in research and development. I think this is a constant journey, and to stay ahead of technology. So you are well equipped when the changes happen to be able to navigate all of this. And above all, you need a purpose-driven organization. You need a team that is inspired by a larger sense of purpose, because they are the people who will actually make all this happen. So really, these are the ingredients that help us navigate change, and we have seen that we were able to do it quite well during the the changes that happened during the pandemic. Not something that any organization would have been prepared for or envisioned.
Point. We will talk a little more about the pandemic in just a bit, but you spoke about challenges, you spoke about change, and that sets me up for the question to Dr. Reddy. You know, you had another challenge also, because India wasn't a very equitable growth opportunity for all genders, and you being where you are may have had its own set of challenges. What would you have to say to all the other women aspirants who want to be leaders like you?
It's very important not just for women to support the cause of women, but for all professionals, for every member of society to appreciate the fact that women empowerment is a critical aspect to the overall development of society. Not only can an equalization of women in the workforce and a strengthening of women in their entrepreneurial role enhance the GDP of the country, but I believe society at large is benefited. I also do want to add that I think India in many ways is a very conducive environment for women at work at one level, which is the practical level. So some of the challenges related to multitasking, juggling roles, etc., India has a more, I won't say equitable, but a supportive ecosystem in terms of family as well as the availability of help. However, the time is now for us to further appreciate the capability of women and start young. Whether it's STEM education, we need to get more girls and more women into STEM education. We need to ensure that they have ownership of property so that they have the ability to raise capital for their business ideas. So there's a range of things, but I also want to say that I'm so happy that there's so many fantastic initiatives happening. Yesterday, we relaunched, the initiative Niti Aayog for the Women Entrepreneurship Panel. While I was in FICCI last year as president, we launched what we call the Greater 50%. And we said this because while women make up only 48% of the population, we believe that their impact is greater than 50%. So women should definitely be empowered, but not just for the sake of the woman itself, but for the sake of society and the country at large.
Fair point. We take that. You know, in fact, what you spoke about, the property rights for women is also an important point that we need to discuss going forward as well. But Dr. Goenka, you know, from whatever you've experienced across sectors in your life, in the auto space, and more than that, you know, the farmers that you impact, what has inspired you so far? Any person, any event? What have your key learnings been?
Well, answer to such questions turn out to be cliches. So I just want to be careful. But I can truly and honestly say that what inspires me is the potential that India has. And as I look at my sector and I look at many other sectors, India is really under-leveraged in terms of what it can achieve with the resources that we have, human resources and natural resources. And there's a lot more that India can do if the business, the consumers, and the government can really form a very strong partnership. And that's perhaps my biggest inspiration on the opportunities that we have in India. And we started off with a question on brand. And to me, building brand India is something that is very important and something that I really am always very happy, very inspired to see when I see an Indian brand doing well outside India. It doesn't matter whose brand it is, as long as it's Indian brand. And I think if the industry leaders, the business leaders kind of put their mind to seeing how they can help India achieve its true potential, I think India can be a much stronger and much economically strong nation in the world, and that's really my true inspiration.
From a business standpoint, Mr. Puri, what's the next level of growth for India and in that for ITC?
First of all, India, there is a lot of potential and a lot of hope in India because India is a consumption-driven economy and India will continue to grow. I think the question we have to ask is, can we make the growth faster? Can we make the growth more inclusive? Can we make the growth in a fashion that continues to nourish the environment? I mean, those are really the questions. And to my mind, this whole idea of Aatmanirbhar Bharat is a very timely and powerful idea that seeks to inspire everybody to create an India that is more competitive, resilient, that engages even more with the global economy and does so successfully. So that economic growth is spurred, jobs are created, and we also do well for the planet. And if you look at can India do it? I think very much so. If you look at the resilience and the creativity that we experienced during the pandemic, the speed with which India bounced back, I think it's truly amazing. There are a lot of policy interventions that have happened, the PLI, whether it's the PLI scheme that has come about or the changes in the agriculture sector. Now, all of these create the right enabling conditions to scale up manufacturing, to create competitive agri-value chains so that India can play a much larger role in the global trade as far as agriculture is concerned and also in value addition. So the opportunity is tremendous in India, and there are other sectors like the wood-based industry. It's a much smaller industry, but the policy interventions that have happened have already begun to spur the complete cycle from plantation to growth to manufacturing of the entire value chain, which in over a period of time will actually create 22 million person days of employment on an annualized basis. That's not a small number. So potential is huge. I think similarly, tourism industry, I think the potential is huge. We have about 26 million people last year who went outside for various reasons of tourism. If we can create the infrastructure and offer that kind of value proposition or even better in India, and there's no reason why we cannot do it, I think the potential is huge. And I truly believe there's a lot of hope from ITC's perspective. I believe that the segments that we are in, all the segments, whether it's agriculture, FMCG, hospitality, the paper business, I think there is huge opportunity over time to grow, and all the enabling conditions have been put in place. There are, of course, three things that we are going to focus on. If I was to say that, what have we learned through the pandemic, and how are we going to accelerate the growth? One is we have seen unprecedented adoption in digital. All of us have seen it and across the society. So it's time for us to, although digital has always been a strong pillar of our strategy, I think it's time to reimagine digital. And the best people to do that are the youngsters in the organization. So we have created what we call is the Digital Innovators Lab. These are youngsters in the organizations that are going to reimagine digital for us and actually mentor the Leadership Digital Council. The second is that we need to build back better. I mean, we've seen the challenges of inclusive growth, and we also saw the planet heal itself quite well. That reinforces the belief that if we do the right things, we can kind of nourish the planet quite well. So that has led us to announce Sustainability 2.0, which reflects bolder ambitions, our ambitions to make a more meaningful contribution to create a better future for the generations ahead. And the third learning is that what we've seen is that purposeful innovation can happen quite rapidly because of the capability and capacities we have within India and within our organization. And we've been able to successfully do a lot of it during the pandemic, 71 new products brought to the market. So we're going to really dial down even more or dial up even more the investments that we are doing to create intellectual capacity, the research and development capacity, so that we can innovate even more and even more speedily going forward.
Okay, so you've laid out the highway for us, so to say. You've given us the potential, you've given us the kind of policy that is there, and you've given us the opportunity. But let me go back to the auto man to tell us whether there are potholes in this highway or there are speed breakers. What could the challenges be?
I think the vision that Sanjeev has laid out is a vision that we all should believe in. And I would say that if you really want to go much further ahead than where we are, the first thing required is first to change our mindset. We have too much of this, India is a poor country. India cannot afford to do this. India shouldn't be doing that. Why not? India is not, as a country, a poor country. We just have lots of people in India, but India has a $3 trillion GDP. And we need to think not like a poor country, but like a country that can afford to do things for future, that can afford to invest in future. We need to stop being skeptical about things that we are doing. If you look at India, it has a lot going for it. Large domestic market, abundance of natural resources, competitive business scenario, large private sector, a frugal mindset, large population that's conversant in English, which is a positive, good software skill, overall good STEM education, technology institutes like IITs, ISCs, which are amongst the best in the world. A government currently that is really pushing ahead with reform and a very good startup ecosystem. So I think we have it all. Now, if you ask about potholes, the potholes are basically lack of partnership. Everybody has to partner. Whether it is industry with the government, whether it is business with the consumer, whether it is supplier with the user industry, everybody has to partner. And if we can really forge a very strong partnerships and not look at competing with my other Indian counterpart, but competing with the world. How does India compete with the world? And really grow not at 5, 6, 7%, but 10, 11, 12% for sustained number of years. It can happen. What it requires is partnership, true partnership, believe in each other and making it happen.
True partnership. All right, then I'll have the lady have the last word. You are also from the hospitals industry, the medical industry. So give us a good metric check of where we are, where we need to be, and what the opportunity is.
So clearly, I think all of us are and should be inspired by the potential of our country and the stage that we're in. I think that we're on the, literally on the cusp of a very tremendous growth opportunity, and the speed and the scale at which we can achieve this is going to be kind of predicated on a few things. And I agree with, everything that Sanjeev and Pawan said. They were fantastic points. In addition to that, I think that it's important for us, number one, the speed and the scale of the vaccine rollout will accelerate the return of normalcy and then our ability to move forward. And on that one, I think, we're on a great track. We're on, a made in India or a manufactured in India vaccine with an inclusive rollout, and the concept of inclusive, including, India supplying to the world. I think this sets us fantastically on a track. On the next stage, I think the entire aspect of the recognition of the importance of healthcare, the focus on healthcare, on prevention. This is something that we as an organization, so during the pandemic, we put up a really, I think our teams put up a valiant battle, and the all-country healthcare workers did that, but the result has been outstanding. I think the world is talking about the fact that our mortality rates are under 1.5%, the spread has been contained, and business is getting back. So taking this to the next level, during the pandemic, we understood that those with non-communicable disease, which is the underlying epidemic in the country, those with comorbidities had a greater propensity. And so I believe it's important enough for all of us to focus on a healthy India. And this is what we at Apollo are definitely going to do. We did a Kavach response or a shield response to COVID. We're now moving out with a pro-health or a proactive response to people. But coming back to the country and going beyond health, I think fiscal stimulus or the ability to have adequate capital to fund a $5 trillion economy, further pushes in terms of manufacturing, furthering this whole aspect of moving up in terms of ease of doing business, ease of running a business. And last year when I was president of FICCI, and FICCI is continuing to push on this agenda, that we must make it India is the best destination for FDI and is the most powerful and productive country. So we should not lose productivity on logistics, on meaningless, repetitive paperwork. So improvement in these two parameters will help us move forward. I have two more points. One is that I believe very importantly that this pandemic has taught us the importance of science. So using science and technology, both, and tech is very critical. So our tech backbone is laid. India is really moving forward fantastically on this point. Adding the science and the tech together will help us not just build back, but build future. So let us move towards where the puck is going. And that is this dematerialized, demonetized, completely democratized world. Where ESG is a very important aspect. So let us move towards building future in that manner. And then finally, I do want to say that I think it's very important for all of us to celebrate India, to celebrate the successes we have, and to celebrate each other. So, you know, a few days ago, we celebrated the fact that our first liver transplant patient came to us when he was 20 months old, and he graduated medicine a few months ago and came to visit us. The fact that India has credible transplant programs, a fantastic space program that we're capable of manufacturing, and now we should do world-class manufacturing at scale, and that our education should not be pockets of excellence, but become really in an ocean of inadequacy, really, but become pervasive for the whole country and for the world to come to India to learn. So let's think big, and ultimately, I think, as we're inspired by the power of the nation, our farmers, our teachers, our doctors, and by our youth. Because unless we build this strong India, which is creating jobs for 17 million people, we will be underserving the potential of our youth. And so with all this, I believe that we move forward collectively and strongly into this vision for a powerful, self-reliant India.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dr. Reddy, for that. At the same time, I'll also thank Dr. Goenka and Mr. Sanjeev Puri for laying out all those points. In fact, the destination Swabhiman Bharat has a fair amount of milestones on the road. We have trust in purposeful brands, equitable distribution of opportunity, and democracy of ideas. At the same time, we need to work on our innovation and, importantly, forge good partnerships for the destination Swabhiman Bharat. This has been an interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining in.
Well, India Inc. definitely has some very interesting lessons for a Swabhiman Bharat. We take a short pause on the Indiathon. At this stage, we will resume with a focus on India's global pride keepers on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching ITC presents Swabhiman Bharat Indiathon, a Network 18 initiative. India's top policymakers, corporate icons, thought leaders and influencers have come together for this special initiative. Time now to put the spotlight on those who are an important source of pride and joy for Indians. Well, India also needs to tap into its soft power. From yoga and Ayurveda to cricket and movies, India's soft power has played an important part in influencing and often inspiring the world. Many from these fields have kept the tricolour flying high overseas and are a symbol of India's pride and accomplishments. Our next session is all about India's global pride keepers and how their views on soft power are energizing a Swabhiman India. We have CNN News 18's managing editor Zaka Jacob in conversation with those who have brought glory to India and joy to Indians.
Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on Swabhiman Bharat. When we talk about a self-reliant India, we often think of hard power, things like defense budget, exports, manufacturing, global trade share, and so on and so forth. But there is also something called soft power, and in that department, India has done rather well in the last many decades, exporting things like Bollywood films, yoga, Indian cuisine, you name it. All of these have created a space, a talking point in the average Westerner's mind about India. What may we be able to do more in spreading Indian soft power which will complement and has to necessarily complement Indian hard power. What can India do to enhance its soft power and its standing around the world in the Prime Minister's vision of making India an Aatmanirbhar and a Swabhiman Bharat? So, joining us on this special broadcast are three very, very special guests. I'll be joined by renowned Indian author Amish Tripathi, Member of Parliament from the Congress Party, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and Indian badminton team coach Pullila Gopichand. First, it's Amish Tripathi. Thank you very much, Amish, for speaking with us on this special broadcast. When we speak about India's soft power and what is it that India can sell to the world in terms of ideas, somehow Indian soft power in the eyes of the average Westerner is restricted to Bollywood movies. Why is it that we've not been able to sell our way of life, our philosophies, our religions, our ethics, just the Indian way of thinking as much?
Very good question, Zaka, but I'll handle this from two perspectives. One, there are cases where countries have had hard power, but not soft power.
Yes.
Nations have had that before. So the Mongols, for example, had tremendous hard power, very little soft power, even when they were at their peak of their power. But America has both hard power and soft power. But you find very few examples of the reverse. A country which is low on hard power, but has high soft power. That doesn't really happen normally. Right? So hard power is kind of like a necessary, but not sufficient condition for soft power. So I think the first problem is, honestly, India did not have enough hard power for a long time. It's only post 1991, let's be honest, when we gave up our, frankly, almost suicidal economic policies, and liberalized and gave up the ghost of socialism. That so many of us were, you and I, Zaka, in our families have been pulled out of out of poverty but there are still many left behind. So that's the first step. As we become stronger economically, you will find that our soft power will also expand or could expand. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect, I think many parts of our culture, and I'm living in London now, have actually become popular already. It's just that often the ownership has been confused.
Missing.
So yoga, for example, became hugely popular. But let's be honest, being brutally honest, we cannot give ourselves, us Indians, the credit for building it up. It was built up more by the flower power generation in the US in the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
But at least fortunately, over the last few years, we've at least reclaimed ownership for yoga. There was a very real danger in the West of, yoga being dissociated from India. I know it sounds bizarre now, but there was a very real danger, right?
Yeah.
But so that was built up by itself. I think there are so many examples of our present way of life and our ancient way of life, which could be used to build up, but we don't build up. We don't work on it. A lack of hard power, which will get addressed over time.
Yeah.
But we have to be conscious of building our soft power as well. We're not conscious enough, frankly, at this stage. We're slowly getting there, but it'll take time.
Now, one of the things that's being popularized, particularly in the last few years and since this government came to power under Prime Minister Modi, is these religious circuits or corridors, whether it is for the Buddhist circuit via Lumbini and so on, or whether it is the Ramayan circuit via Ayodhya. All of these sort of pilgrimage routes, as it were, how does that help popularize the idea of India being a confluence of cultures, a confluence of religions, and how may this popularize the idea of India in the West in a way that we can attract more tourists and more, admirers and people who want to come to India for this confluence of cultures?
The thing is, the facts are there. We just need to build up the narrative. So often we Indians forget the true scale of our country. We have more people in India than all of North America, all of Europe, all of Middle East combined.
Yes.
We have more languages than all these regions combined. We have more cuisines than all these regions combined. In the Western world, Indian cuisine is thought to be a particular part of Punjabi cuisine and some Lucknowi cuisine. That's it. That they think is Indian cuisine. right?
True.
I mean, we know it's much big. I love Lucknowi and Punjabi cuisine, but they don't even cover all of Punjabi cuisine. Forget about all of Indian cuisine. So you said so rightly on our religious circuits. There are so many there. At least 35, depending on how you count it, 35 to 40 Buddhist countries, and Gautam Buddha was from the Indian subcontinent. We can build that, to get to build stronger relations with the Buddhist countries. Of course, there are many Hindus around the world as well. Yoga, Ayurveda, our music, the fact that it's India is one of those few lands where practically every religious group lives together in relative harmony. It's perhaps the only country in the world where a significant number of Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims actually live in peace.
True.
We Indians are so used to it, we don't realize how
Take it
out
for
of the
granted,
ordinary
yeah.
it is. In most other countries in the world, Shias and Sunnis, the fights that happen, we can speak of this. There are so many things we can speak of. The facts are there. We need to start building the narrative. It will build over time.
There is always this comparison, and whether we like it or not, this is going to be par for course for the next few decades, the India-China comparison. Clearly, China has a lot of hard power, whether it's military muscle, whether it is economic muscle. One of the things that they've found difficult is to propagate the idea of soft power. They have tried a few things like Confucius institutes and promoting medieval Chinese culture and so on. It hasn't really caught on in the eyes of the Western world. India, though, has this natural drawing ability, whether it's our culture, whether it's our food, whether it's our religions, whether it's our philosophies, our way of thinking. How can India play that to further its advantage when it comes to this soft power differential with China?
I must say that actually traditional Chinese culture is actually quite attractive. I'm not so sure if the present, I'm a diplomat, so I have to be a little careful. But I'm not so sure the present regime represents the traditional Chinese culture, to be honest, my personal view.
Sure.
Right? And of course, what COVID has done to the entire world certainly affects that. India, on the other hand, if you see, there are a few global soft power reports that come out. There was one that I had been invited to speak at. It was pre-COVID times, in London. And India was actually shockingly ranked 27th out there, right? I was the only Indian, not just on stage, even in the audience, right?
Wow.
Forget about on stage, even in the audience, there weren't that many Indians interested in it. This was a conference where Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General, had come to speak.
Yes.
So it was a high-profile, good event. But what that actually showed to me that our real problem is not so much a positive or a negative image. Our real problem is actually we have no image. Among the masses, we are not as top of mind as the second most populous country, as the 5th largest economy in the world should be, right?
Yes.
That to me is the key problem. Having said that, when I spoke to the people who put the report together, they said that I know you guys might think 27 is very low, but actually it's a vast improvement to what it was, a few years ago. So the movement is in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. And look, soft power is not built in, a few years. It's a generation or two, and we have to be conscious of it. And one of the key things I realize, I believe, what is soft power? It's essentially branding, right?
Yeah.
If you make the brand too different from the product, right, it doesn't work, right? The brand has to be true to the product, So if we Indians are going to go around the world saying, oh, we are this fantastically disciplined, compliant guys, that's not going to work, right? We are not, okay? We're the most rebellious people around. We are one of the most difficult people to manage, right? But if we get the point of, if our brand shows that we are rebellious, yes, but we are also passionate and freedom loving and cool, then it fits the product. You know what I mean? So what we have to do is when we have plans for for our brand, it should be true to our realities. Too many people in India, and I find that a little bizarre at times, want us to be like China. We cannot be like China. We are not like them. We're a bit more like how the US was, in its phase when it was growing fast.
Yeah.
Rebellious, chaotic, apparently on the surface, but also very passionate, very creative. So we have to see that as a model rather than China. We're not that kind of compliant country which will quietly just follow rules. We know we are not. I mean, you start laughing the moment I said, that if someone said India is this disciplined, compliant country which will always follow the rules, we Indians know that's not going to happen, boss.
True.
All right, Dr. Tharoor now joins me, a member of parliament from the Congress party and somebody who's been a diplomat for a large part of his career. Dr. Tharoor, talking about soft power, why is it that even after, 30 years since liberalization, in the eyes of the common Westerner, whether it's American or British or Western European, the idea of India's soft power is somehow just restricted to Bollywood movies? We have not been able to popularize anything else. Why is that the case?
Well, I think part of the problem has been, first of all, that we came to it a bit late. I remember with some immodesty, I can say I was probably the first person to speak about it in relation to India. The man who came up with the entire concept of soft power, Harvard professor Joseph Nye, happened to be a friend of mine. And he was the one who, in the early 90s, for the first time, devised this notion that power doesn't just have to be hard power of either military muscle, that is using sticks, or economic power, that is using payments, but rather can be about attraction, your cultural assets, your values, your foreign policies, and so on. But the purpose of soft power should be both as an alternative to hard power and as a complement to it. Now, that idea was very much devised by Nye in the context of the US. But I thought with his permission that I could apply it to India, and I did. And from around the turn of the century, I started talking about it. And I'm very pleased that I was invited in 2006 or 7 by RNAW in this country to deliver the first RNAW lecture. And I chose that topic and they welcomed it. And this became, therefore, something that entered the discourse. The Foreign Secretary and others were in the audience. And now it's being very routinely talked about that this is our biggest asset. At that point, it was a hard sell. I remember trying to talk, for example, to the assembled ambassadors at the Ministry of External Affairs for the annual conference. And there was a lot of skepticism. They said, no, traditional foreign policy is really serious stuff. All this business about Bollywood and yoga and Ayurveda and Indian cuisine, this is all fluff. It doesn't really matter. In other words, soft power says, we're not going to rely in persuading you only through coercive hard power, military force, or through buying you off with foreign aid or whatever. We're going to be so nice, you're going to want to be with us. I mean, remember the joke about how all these protesters outside American embassies in the Middle East were shouting, Yankee, go home, and whispering below that, and take me with you. Because they really wanted to be part of that. So that's the whole soft power concept. And in the case of India, I would say that it was our big strength that we had all the soft power at a time when our foreign policy alone or our economic might alone wasn't enough to impress itself upon the world's consciousness. And Nye in his books pointed out that today being the information age, three types of countries are likely to gain soft power and therefore succeed in the world. One, he said, are those whose dominant cultures and ideals are closer to prevailing global norms. And he defined those norms as liberalism, pluralism, and so on, which obviously reflected in India. Democracy was India's big asset. Second, those with most access to multiple channels of communication, and therefore having some more influence over how issues are framed. So those who actually, for example, were dominating international television networks, satellite TV, and all of that, and news agencies, obviously their stories got told more than ours. And then those whose credibility is enhanced by their domestic and international performance. So that was the message that I gave. And I thought we could actually, in this age where it's no longer the country with the bigger army that wins, we can be the country with the better story. And the better story is what wins. And I must say that, in many ways, that was the strength of it. Just to conclude, since you asked why we haven't done, I think the counter answer is we haven't leveraged it consciously enough. Because when you have a festival of India, you're doing something very self-conscious that to people looks like propaganda. And propaganda is recognized by people around the world for what it is. Soft power is as much something that comes across by accident or without government action as what comes across as a result of deliberate government action. So, for example, the Voice of America or the Fulbright scholarships are deliberate American government action for soft power. But if you enjoy a Coke or want an American pizza or a McDonald's hamburger or whatever, that's got nothing to do with the government, but you're doing something that's part of your affinity for an American lifestyle.
Right.
You see the difference?
Yeah.
So when somebody does yoga and they know it's come from India, that helps India. But when somebody goes to an international festival of India sponsored by the government of India, that's a government exercise and they see it as that. That's one of the differences.
You know, in 2020, in the context of the virus, COVID-19, and the Chinese stock, as it were, has fallen in global capitals around the world. What can India do to capitalize on that? Because this contestation between India and China, as I said a moment ago to Amish, this contestation between India and China is going to be there for the next few decades.
You're right, Zaka, but at the same time, soft power alone will not win that rivalry.
Yes.
Let me stress with it that the fact is that soft power without hard power is an admission of weakness. Hard power without soft power is bullying, and that's what the Chinese have been doing more and more, and it's arguably more unpopular. But if you have soft power and you don't have hard power, if you don't have the ability to have credible military strength at the border to deter attack, if you don't show that you have the political will to resist encroachments on your territory, that is simply going to be seen as weakness, both by the Chinese and by the rest of the world watching you. So I would argue you need both soft power and hard power. At the same time, I'm conceding that the world of the 21st century will increasingly be a world in which the use of hard power carries with it the odium of mass global public disapproval, whereas a blossoming of soft power will lend itself more easily to the information era and will be a great asset for us here. So we need both. Now, obviously, we've tried some of this even in China. I mean, the fact that some Bollywood movies were big hits in China added to our soft power in China at a time when most Chinese were indifferent to us as a country. They were focused only on Western countries or on Southeast Asian neighbors. Even Chinese tourism, which took off in a big way before the COVID pandemic, and there were millions of Chinese tourists on the loose around the world, we got hardly any of them. I think we got fewer Chinese tourists coming into India than we got Indian students going to study in China. So it really was an embarrassingly low number. But things like, you know, if they watch Dangal and they watch Three Idiots, and on the basis of that, they're curious about India, that's a way in which soft power enhances Chinese tourism here, etc. Of course, we're now far away from tourism thanks to what happened in Ladakh and the death of 20 soldiers. But my point is that soft power is not about conquering others. It's about being yourself. And being yourself has to be attractive in its own self. Now, that means that we are going to be judged by the Chinese and by the rest of the world, both on hard power, that is our military credibility, our economic growth, our economic and military muscle, but also on our soft power elements that we project onto the global consciousness, which we can sometimes do deliberately, like through the export of cultural products. I mentioned, you mentioned Bollywood, the festivals of India abroad, and so on, the cultivation of foreign publics, but also what we project unwittingly through the ways in which we are perceived as a result of news stories about our country in the global mass media.
All right, when we talk about soft power, there is also sport. We know how popular cricket is around the world, but then cricket is played by only a handful of countries around the world. Let me now go across to Pulela Gopichand, who's the coach of the Indian badminton team, also a very successful player in his own right back in the day. Thanks very much, Gopi, for speaking with us. You know, we always have this comparison of cricket versus other sports, right? Somehow, this dichotomy where cricket is so hugely popular here in this country, and yet when you talk about exporting soft power, when you talk about, you know, popularizing Indian sports around the world, cricket has a very limited appeal. It's still, even today, played only by very few countries, largely, you know, what used to be British colonies. Whereas a sport like badminton is played by so many countries around the world, here in Asia and in Europe. Around the world, we have players who come from all kinds of countries, and yet somehow we have not been able to popularize the idea of India being a badminton powerhouse. Yes, recently, you know, after you came to the fore back in the 90s, and then we've had the women players in Saina and PV Sindhu and so on. But somehow we're not seen as a badminton powerhouse like a China is, or even now, you know, the Danes are. there are badminton powerhouses. We are not somehow seen in that same league. Why is that?
I think we in the last 10 years have done very well in the sport. In fact, from where we started off to where we are now, I think there's been a significant progress. And whether it's medals at the Asian, Commonwealth, World Championship or Olympics, many of these have been after many, many years or for the first time ever. So I'm very happy with the progress, and I hope that in the years to come, we'll have many more coming our way from our country.
And in this sort of battle between cricket and other sports, or cricket versus non-cricket sports, how much are the other sports getting suffered because of that? Because clearly, you know, if you're a kid who is, you know, growing up in Chennai or Hyderabad or Bangalore or Delhi, wherever, or even any of the tens of small towns in this country, they all want to be like Virat Kohli, or they want to be like Tendulkar or the big cricketer. It's only now that, you know, girls are coming out and saying they want to be like Sindhu or they want to be like Saina. And, you know, after Sania Mirza burst onto the scene, they're coming out and saying they want to be like Sania. How much more needs to be done to popularize the idea of non-cricket sports amongst our own young people?
Well, as far as sport in general is concerned, in the last few years, there's definitely been a push from the government, from corporates, and from the citizens equally to ensure that there is a need. Everybody understands today the need for sport. And it's great to see that that support is culminating into more people take up sport, Halo India, Fit India, whether it's Yoga Day, or various other sports doing well at the Olympic level for the first time, whether it's shooting, wrestling, boxing, badminton. I think we have many sports doing well. And I do believe that as a nation, we have started to become a more overall sporting nation rather than a cricket only nation. Of course, the difference between cricket and the other sport is a lot, but still I would say other sports have been, we've got some good champions from other sports as well.
All right, so on that note, I want to thank all three of our special guests for joining us on this special broadcast on Swabhiman Bharat, Amish Tripathi, Sashi Tharoor, and of course, Pullela Gopichand. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you at home had been tuned in to this special broadcast, thank you for your time. We'll catch you again next time.
Time for a breather on ITC presents Swabhiman Bharat Indiathon, a Network 18 initiative. We will be back with the leaders who are driving India's sustainable future. Stay tuned. Moving on from tapping into India's soft power to laying the foundations for a sustainable future. From renewable energy and reducing carbon footprint to green buildings and smart mobility solutions, a Swabhiman Bharat is built on the foundations of a sustainable Bharat. Our next panel has CNBC TV 18 Sonal Bhutra in conversation with leaders of India's sustainable journey so far. India's greenest companies which have set an example for others to emulate en masse.
Hello and welcome to this very special show. ITC presents Swabhiman Bharat Indiathon. It is an initiative by Network 18 and we are going to discuss a very important topic, that is sustainability. It has increasingly become a part of core corporate strategy for companies across the board. And according to estimates, 60% of Indian companies have mapped their activities to sustainable development goals. And the post-pandemic recovery will have sustainability and focus on climate-friendly initiatives at the core of it. To discuss this, well, we have three guests. Sanjeev Rangras, who is the Group Head R&D and Sustainability and Projects at ITC, Alka Talwar, Chief CSR and Sustainability Officer at Tata Chemicals, and Anirban Ghosh, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at M&M. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It is a topic which is of sheer importance right now, and more so because the economic recovery right now will have to go hand in hand with sustainability. So that brings me to the first question, and that is to you, Ms. Talwar. We have learned a lot in last year. 2020 has been unprecedented in a lot of ways. So what have you learned? What has Tata Chemicals learned from 2020 in terms of sustainability, and what is the action plan in 2021?
Thanks so much for inviting me for this program. It's great to be here. Yes, last year has been a year of a lot of uncertainties, and fortunately for Tata Chemicals, we were expecting the worst, and it hasn't been as bad as we expected. Mainly because we have worked on the key learnings that we got through this time. If I would to sort of reflect on the key learnings, there are three things that come in my mind. One is on agility, the other is on innovation, and the third one is on care. And we actually immediately changed the way we work. We looked at providing things. The first thing we looked at is what we could provide to the community. We started producing sanitizers. We started producing hypochlorite to support the government and to support people. So we changed our products to make it immediately available to the government and for the communities at large. So it's about doing it immediately, and it's about innovating and thinking on your feet, and it's about looking at what we can do better for the communities around us. I think that's been the critical learning. And in terms of our business, yes, the first few months seemed really, really uncertain. But as we moved along and things started moving up, I think it was very easy to bounce back. Also because we were doing all the things that were required to be safe, to be consistent with our policies, and to look at long-term approach in all the things that we've been doing. So I think these were the key things that sort of helped us during this time. Going forward, I think these three remain consistent for us, and this is what we are going to continue to focus on: agility, innovation, and care.
Okay, so I will come back to you on these 3 points very soon. But Mr. Rangras, let me come across to you. There is so much that we can focus on, right? There's renewable energy, we have water conservation. 2021 has a lot in line for us. As a group, ITC is focusing on what immediately? What is the top 3 priority for the group right now?
Ma'am, I think recently our chairman openly made a statement on sustainability 2.0. I think all of you are aware that ITC has been on the forefront of sustainability for the last 2 decades. I think there are not 3 things, ma'am. I would focus on 6 things, which is the core of our sustainability 2.0. First, I think I'll focus on livelihoods. Let's not forget the people who have been impacted the most. And I think we need to craft inclusive strategies that can generate millions of livelihoods. To me, that is number 1. Number 2 is carbon and water neutrality. I think all sections of society need to work towards that before pursuing a path to net positive status. That is something which we are pursuing. Third is about climate change. Since we are so heavily involved in agriculture, so de-risking agriculture and the vulnerable farmers. So we are doing climate smart villages, and I think that is where majority of the population of India resides, and we would like a specific focus on that as the third pillar of our sustainability 2.0. Fourth would be for me to look at the circular economy. We are in the FMCG sector, so I think we need to reduce, reuse and recycle waste to optimize resource use. And yes, we talk a lot about solid waste recycling and plastic. We are doing all that. We should be, as of today, what we generate and what we produce and what we collect is far more, several times over, solid waste recycling. Fifth for me would be biodiversity, to ensure that we create the right ecological balance for a sustainable future. And finally, I think it is all about forging meaningful public-private partnerships so that we can synergize individual sector expertise to amplify impact and reach. So, at the end of the day, our sustainability 2.0 is all about we and not just me. It's a conscious, passionate, decisive endeavor to join forces to save our country and our planet.
Okay, so we will come back to each point in your list very soon, Mr. Rangras. Mr. Ghosh, let me come to you. I was going through the sustainability report and I saw a term called alternativism. This is something that Mr. Mahindra has coined, and he goes on to say that it will be key to turning sustainability into a mass movement for the company going ahead. What does it mean? What is this ism that you have added to the dictionary? And what are the plans that M&M has as far as sustainability is concerned?
this ism is really interesting. You've got 9 things that organizations have learned or are going to do going forward already. But how are we going to do all those 9 things? Especially if we have to work within planetary boundaries, which we have learned during COVID, that is a very important thing to do. To be able to operate within planetary boundaries, we need low carbon solutions. You and I need to live in a way in which our emissions are much lower, where we manage our waste a lot better, and we create far less pollution. For this, we need solutions. And these solutions are an integral part of alternativism. Let me give you an example. If we have to, say, make automobiles, and suppose we use 100 units of energy today, then making automobiles with 40 units of energy a few years down the line is an example of alternativism. If we have to live in a building, then looking at green buildings is an example of alternativism. In fact, circular economy is a very good example of alternativism, of making sure that the waste that we produce doesn't go to landfills and that we can actually create some value out of it. So these are some examples of alternativism. There are some businesses that the Mahindra Group has invested in, which fall in this space. And these businesses include responsible recycling of automobiles, solar energy, shared mobility, electric vehicles, waste to energy, green buildings, and so on. So this is why Mr. Mahindra says that alternativism is an ism for the future.
Absolutely, and that is very interesting, Mr. Ghosh. But I'm picking a point from what you said, and that was about circular economy. And this is something Mr. Rangras also mentioned. So, Ms. Talwar, let me come across to you. Plastic waste has been a big menace, right? India produces around 25,000 tons of plastic waste every day. So that continues to be a big problem. And yes, the industry has a big role to play in that. You've been using plastic as an alternate fuel source at the cement plant, supporting the circular economy concept. So you've been into that. Tell us more about it. How did that idea come up? What is the execution like? And what are the milestones that you plan to achieve from this?
So let me, go back in time and talk about the journey of Tata Chemicals. In fact, all of what Tata Chemicals has been doing is part of circular economy. The fact that we set up the cement plant was a reason, once again, was on circular economy. We wanted to do something that could utilize our waste, and we had waste, limestone waste. We had gypsum from our salt works, and we had fly ash from our boilers, and we didn't know what to do because it was going into the landfills. So the whole process that we used was, set up a plant which was then using all the waste to produce something of value to the to the world. So we produced cement. Similarly, we looked at wanting to make water and said, how do we desalinate? What do we do with the residue? And we came up with the idea of providing iodized salt. And, it's history now that Tata Salt is, the Desh Ka Namak, as we all call it. So it's been our DNA. We continue to work, and we look at all the waste streams. We look at all the energy streams. We work across the value chain. We look at all the possibilities of ensuring that how we can, be more resource efficient, less wasteful. How do we use water, every stream of water that we have? And the way we started, started using plastic, not only to use it as an alternate fuel in the cement plant, but also to provide livelihood to the local communities.
Okay, so Mr. Rangras, my next question is to you. For next 1 decade, ITC is focusing on ensuring that 100% of your packaging is reusable. It is a big task to achieve, of course, because this is something very usual for people to go ahead and use plastic not in the most proper manner. How are you as a company ensuring that there is more awareness when it comes to the consumers, and also at the group level? How are you going to achieve this target?
I, as the group head for both sustainability and R&D, I am evaluating the entire value chain And we are finding that by next year. So let me first give you a slight perspective on the solid waste part, because it is linked to that. So in the solid waste, ma'am, if you see, whilst you talked about 25,000 tons of plastic being generated, it is actually, if you ask me, the problem is far more than that. The problem is actually all about the total solid waste which is being generated. So almost 166,000 tons of garbage is generated on a daily basis. 48,000 tons is recyclable, and 26,000, like you said, you use the figure 25, I'm talking 26, is plastic which is used every day. And we believe, according to the World Bank, that this will almost double by 2025. This means about 40 acres of land is being brought under landfill on a daily basis. So what am I doing? So there are multiple things. One is about reduction, which is the specific reduction. How do I move from multi-layered plastics to single use? We anyway have very limited use of multi-layered plastics. How to move to monolayers, and then how to convert the monolayers into biocompostable or completely recycling. So these are multiple channels. So when I look at the R&D side, we are looking at new ways of putting additives on the films which allow them to become biocompostable. So whatever are the norms as per the government, how do I layer this entire thing with special additives which allow the biocompostability of the plastic films? So very easily, we are also into the paper business. How do we move a lot of plastics into paper and yet protect the product which we are delivering? How do we reduce the total specific consumption? If we are using a slightly thicker film, can we use a slightly thinner film? Can we in some places avoid using a film? And then also try in the exterior world how to go about collecting this, and how to create a complete system by which we can collect and then dispose in a very, very what you call a good fashion, so that it doesn't move into the environment.
Sustainable packaging is something everybody's been focusing on, and I'm taking an important point that you just made, and that was about innovation, R&D. So Mr. Ghosh, let me come across to you. What is M&M doing to ensure that there is waste recovery, waste recycling? Because I was just going through some data that was there in your report, and it said that 67% of M&M's hazardous waste has been generated and that has been recycled in the last year. How do you plan to make it 100%, and what have you done to make it 67%?
Mr. Rangrust made a very important point, that the amount of waste we generate leads to a large amount of land being covered by landfills. You will remember some time ago the landfill in Mumbai caught fire, as did the lake in Bellandur. When that happened, in Mahindra, we decided that as a corporation, we will move to not sending anything to landfill. So if you see our sustainability framework, you'll see one line over there which says, ensure no waste to landfill. The work that you mentioned of repurposing and reusing hazardous waste is a part of this work on ensuring no waste to landfill. Today, 21 locations in the group out of 95 identified locations have been certified as being zero waste to landfill. Every kind of waste that was going to landfill, my colleagues have found ways of repurposing them, of using them again, and of creating value. Hazardous waste being one of them. But there are many items of non-hazardous waste, which usually you and I don't think twice about throwing into the dustbin, which are getting repurposed, recycled, and reused as well within our factories.
Last question to the three of you before we let you go. Mr. Ghosh, Ms. Talwar, Mr. Rangras, what do you do in your daily life to ensure sustainability just in your individual lives? Because you're spearheading such an important role in your organizations. Our viewers are watching you. They can make a change on a daily basis. So, Mr. Ghosh, let me start with you. What is that you do on a daily basis to ensure that at least as an individual, you are supporting sustainability?
So let me mention a few easy things first. if all your lights in your house are not LED lights, you can make a contribution very, very quickly by changing them to LED lights. You will save a lot of money in the process. If you are still using old fans, which most of us are, there are wonderful new energy efficient fans in the market. They are called BLDC fans, brushless DC fans. You can just use them and put them in your house, change the fans. You will get fantastic ventilation at much lower cost. If you have air conditioners which are more than 4 or 5 years old, you can very easily replace them. And with the new energy efficient air conditioners now, you will save a lot of money. And if it is, say, the main air conditioner that you use in your house, then you'll probably recover your money within a year or a year and a half. So these are three very easy things to do from an energy perspective. If your taps don't have aerators, please put aerators in the taps. You will be able to wash your hands, but you will use 30 to 40% lower water. And if your flush still doesn't have a dual flush system, then please try and get a dual flush system installed. You will save a lot of water. Incidentally, these are all examples of alternativism. I will leave other examples to come from my fellow panelists, but before I close, I do want to commend Alka for the work that they're doing in Tata Chemicals in capturing carbon dioxide from the air, converting it to carbon, and making an economically feasible product out of it, because that is a very, very important part of the climate solution. And it is a wonderful example of alternativism. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to listen to more examples of personal sustainability.
So, Mr. Rangras, what do you have on your list then?
Ma'am, I spent a decade, 11 years in agriculture, right? So one thing that I learned from the farming community which I interacted with was being minimalistic. To me, that has been my single biggest learning in the last 9 months during COVID, because the first few months we didn't get anything, but we survived. And I lost 5 kgs of weight also. So, you know, what better than this? So we survived. We did so many things on our own. And I think all that was a big example of sustainable living. So I endorse whatever Mr. Ghosh has said, but I would leave you with a thought of, you know, a few things which come to my mind. Number one, think twice before shopping. Second, make sure your big purchases have big environmental benefits. 3, go plastic free. 4th, boycott products that endanger wildlife. 5th, pay attention to labels.
Those are golden words, Mr. Rangras. So, Ms. Talwar, let me come across to you. These were some great things that I have learned. I'm sure our viewers also have learned. What do you do on a daily basis to ensure sustainability? You're doing such fabulous work at Tata Chemicals also.
Yeah, so, you know, all the list is pretty big and everything is got covered by my co-panelists. So I have just a few things to add to it. The most important thing that I think that I do is to buy local. I try and buy to see that, you know, things are not like really coming from very far or they're imported. I try and buy things that are locally made or made by local communities and local people. I promote that in the 2 social enterprises that I've set up. One is on a handicrafts based called Okai, which is now covering almost 24,000 artisans. You know, we try and use local products, natural materials, and the local art, and try and work with, say, farmer producer organizations to get clean, healthy, nutritious, good local food, you know, which is the best kind that one can, you know, sort of use. So that's one, buy local, work with the local communities. Water, you know, so try to avoid showers as much as possible. Use a bucket and a thing. If I'm using shower, I do off on, which is like, you know, wet yourself, switch off the shower, soap yourself, wash off, so that showers can be really a big waste of water. So that's the thing. And the other thing is walk a bit more, and wherever possible, if I can walk to the place, I'd rather do that. I try and avoid taking lift. If it's more than 3 or 4 floors, I will take the lift, but otherwise I try to walk up. Walk down definitely as much as possible. So that's something that I do personally. And the last most important thing is I like working with children, and I want children to know about environment and the effects that, the things that we need to do. They are our future citizens. They have to learn about sustainability, about environment, and wherever possible, I try and volunteer and work with the children so that I can share nature with children, or I can talk about the different things that I've done through my life and share with them opportunities that they can adopt.
Thank you so much, Ms. Talwar, Mr. Ghosh and Mr. Rangras. This was a fabulous interaction. So many thoughts came out of this, and I'm sure it will be very helpful for the viewers at large. Thank you so much for joining.
We'll take a quick break now. On the other side, we have Indian startup unicorns with their vision for a Swabhiman Bharat. Stay tuned. Moving on next to what is termed as India's hard power, the startup community. It has been the single most important agent of transformation of modern India. The Indian startup ecosystem currently has more than 24 unicorns. It has always had huge foreign investor interest right from the nascent stage. CNBC TV 18's managing editor Shireen Bhan, in conversation with the panelists, will now analyze how foreign investors have been in India for a long time and are now increasing their presence given the size of the market and the plethora of investment opportunities. The panel will also talk about how India can leverage its core advantages and become the world's recovery growth engine in a post-pandemic future.
1991 was a watershed moment for the Indian economy that ushered in changes to power private enterprise. India's opening up coincided with the dot-com boom in the mid-90s, sowing the seeds for India's startup ecosystem. The dot-com bust exposed the fragility of awe-inspiring valuations, but it also paved the way for the rise of big tech. 2 decades on, India is home to more than 50,000 startups, with more than 3,000 startups raising $63 billion in funding in the last 5 odd years. At last count, India has 34 unicorns and 52 soonicorns poised to become unicorns by 2022. From fintech, edtech, health tech, food tech and more, young Indian entrepreneurs are hoping to solve for India by leveraging the power of technology. So on this special episode, ITC presents Swabhiman Bharat, an initiative by Network18. We bring you the League of Unicorns to discuss the role of Indian startups to drive growth, create employment and bridge key deficits. Joining me on the Indiathon today to talk about ideas to power India are Vivek Sundar of food tech company Swiggy, Sujit Kumar of Udan, a company that wants to leverage technology to transform B2B trade, and Amrish Rao, the CEO for Pine Labs, a leading fintech player that is delivering on the promise of driving merchant commerce. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Vivek, let me start by asking you, I want you to rewind, flash back to when things actually started for you at Swiggy. What was the big idea then? I mean, where did you hope to be 5 years on? And how different is that picture from where you currently find yourself today?
Well, we started 5 years ago, 6 years ago, actually, in a small neighborhood in Bangalore, trying to solve the food needs of hungry young people who were probably too lazy to stir out and face the crazy Bangalore traffic. So solving consumer problems, whether they're consumers like ourselves or increasingly consumers that are not like ourselves, is been the ethos of Swiggy. So we started there to solve a problem that we believed was a crazy problem that required operations, technology, and frankly, the understanding of consumers that is as diverse as there are people. So given that we tried to solve that in one little place with WhatsApp, frankly, there wasn't much technology back then, even within Swiggy. From there, we've come a long way. Today, we have one of India's most or the world's most downloaded apps. Most people open us pretty much every day. And through Swiggy, through the pandemic, they've used us for all sorts of things, whether it's shipping products from place A to place B, or getting their chargers, or getting their medicines, or what have you. So I think if we had asked ourselves where will we be in 2020, we would never have guessed that we would be where we are today.
Yes, I would imagine that the story would probably have looked very different, and you're absolutely right in pointing out that 2020, though a very rough year, not just for business but for humanity, has actually validated a lot of the tech-driven models, including models like yours. But Sujit, let me come to you with the story of Udaan. You started out in 2016, and the vision or the mission statement was transforming the way trade is done in India using the power of technology. Now, 2020, how has the story panned out for you? What have been the big learnings? What have been the big challenges that you've had to encounter along the way?
I see on hindsight, still though we are in pandemic, but on hindsight, lots of validation has happened, especially in B2B business, where we are in the trade. Because traditionally, there are supplier cities. There's big cities like Delhi, like Mumbai, like Bangalore, Chennai, Kolkata. Almost they're supplying to all across the country for various categories. But if you'll see, in pandemic time, all these cities are virtually, or in reality, we're in lockdown. Nothing can move. I think that's where we see that we have built the capability like supply chain, logistic, from one city to the smaller towns or tier 2, tier 3 cities. It can move the stuff. Mostly retailer, we were they were not able to get the supply on the Udaan platform. Udaan kept them going their business in the pandemic time. So they were not, they don't have to go to the city and procure stuff and come back. Virtually wherever they are, from the safety point of view, from the adoption point of view, from the selection point of view, they were not have been like not starved for the supply, and we have learned lots of things how to keep them going, though there are lots of difficulties, but at the same time we have realized there are lots of goodness, and we have validated those goodness. People have become habitual of procuring, which was very hard to imagine in a normal time.
Yes, you're absolutely right. As I pointed out, there has been a validation. And Amrish, let me come to you now, because, I would imagine that 2020 is the latest in a series of inflection points in the journey of Pine Labs. Started out in 1998, the big pivot really happened in 2004, then perhaps 2016 on account of demonetization for the entire fintech ecosystem, and now because of the pandemic. Take me through what this journey you believe has meant, not just for the company, but also for the business model and delivering financial services using the power of technology in India.
We've done something very simple. We've just followed the consumer. We've followed the move from paper-based cash to digital cash. And that has made our journey very, very fascinating. I can't think a day personally where I think about anything else but just the digitization of cash and digital money. And just by following that in India, for more than 10 years, we've created our own niche and we've had enormous success. In the last 4 years, what has happened is, on the backs of demonetization, on GST, and now COVID, we've seen consumer behavior change, merchant behavior change. You've got to remember, India is a country of small traders, and these small traders want to find any ways to digitize their transactions. And we are serving those traders. Now, we didn't start there at all, but that's where India is going, and we've been following them. I think just now we feel we've reached a point where we have caught up with the Indian consumer and the Indian merchant, and hopefully we'll start delivering better solutions where we can take India into.
That's an important point that you brought up, that you're following the consumer, and there is, of course, a disparate set of consumers that each one of you is going after. So let me get Vivek to comment on that. Speaking about following the consumer, Vivek, what do you see as the different trends that are emerging when it comes to servicing consumers, customer behavior? What are the key insights? There's been a lot of talk about the middle of India, the Bharat, so to speak, how these business models, which one thought would work in urban metros, may not necessarily deliver in small town or rural India or tier 2, tier 3 towns. This is a phenomena that now is seeing penetration across India. What are the trends that you're picking up on? And more importantly, how are you going to leverage on them?
If we think about India as a monolith, then of course you'll get a lot of things wrong. The average Indian doesn't really exist. So what we have found is that leveraging the power of technology and understanding consumers at an individual level, as well as at a cohort level, is key to succeed. It is, after all, many Indias inside one India. And so as we have done our own expansion a couple of years ago, when we took it from 10 cities to 550 cities, we found some fascinating insights that, you know, in hindsight, all looks fine. But of course, when you're starting to scale, you don't think about those differences. But technology and consumer centricity helps you understand this. So, for example, what is the classical snack period in a Bangalore or a Delhi, which is the sort of late evening, is when snacks gets ordered in these cities, is actually dinner time in Jodhpur. So if you basically provide snack options, because the app is providing snack options in Jodhpur at 6:30, you just find that consumers are not biting. They're actually looking for dinner options. So we had to change and understand how consumer habits are, not just the dramatically different culinary habits that are there, but equally on things like what is a late night slot and what is not, and what kind of offerings and what kind of information on the menu would work. I mean, for example, almost all the menus that the retailers in Ujjain gave us were in Devnagari. And our system was just not used to taking in Devnagari menus. So we had to change because we went to India. So I think the sheer diversity of India is, as somebody said, India is more than a continent in a country, is always fascinating for somebody like me who's been with the consumer space for pretty much all my career. And I think just the power of digital and understanding consumers at blitz speed just helps us being able to solve their problems really, really fast. And that's the fascinating part of the journey.
Yes, that certainly is fascinating, and this takes me back to a conversation I remember having many, many years ago with Kishore Biani, where he was talking about how, you know, for rice, for instance, you imagine that rice is just one kind and how different parts of the country consume different kinds of rice, and as a retailer, he had to think about that. But Sujit, you know, I want to put that same question to you as well. You know, what have been the specific challenges in dealing with the consumer? One, getting the consumer to adopt the platform, adopt the technology to start with, but then deliver on what that consumer actually wants. And especially when it comes to things like trade financing, which Udaan has been able to deliver on as well. You know, what were the specific issues that you had to deal with there?
Serene, if you'll see, India, which is more than 90% of the consumption happen through these small retailers or small businesses. You can see there are around 60 million small businesses. Right? Out of that, there are 20 to 30 million. There are retailers. Like Vivek saying that India is very, very different and diversified. Like there is a tier 1, tier 2, different region, and like you were saying that the rice, we supply this rice to almost more than 30 lakh retailers. Kirana shops, and you know that the rice variety itself runs into thousands of variety. What they eat in, let's say, in South, or especially in Bangalore, even in South, what the Bangalore consumes, it's not exactly the same what Cochin consumes. Am I right? So the notion of South is not even same. So with that, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, especially if you go more deeper towards a small town, supplying all the, like giving them the supply, consistent supply, selection, right price. Because for us, our consumers are retailers who serves their hundreds of their catchment customers, and they have their specific need. So we are actually supplying to millions and millions of consumers through these retailers. So and in that we have to be very consistent. We cannot say that. So keeping the selection, keeping the right price, giving them the right selection for that right retailers. I can give you the example. Let's say the retailer who is in, let's say, MG Road in Bangalore, right? Especially clothing retailer. The kind of selection that retailer keeps, or the JP Nagar in a Bangalore, is two different things. So if I say that I have the largest selection, it's irrelevant for them. their selections has to be shown relevancy. So I think we are solving those problems. Like you have asked one question, how you guys are doing the trade financing. I think we are the much better placed in comparison to anybody else because we are supplying them. We exactly know who worth what kind of trade they are doing, what's their appetite, how big their businesses are, and those data help us to assess them rightly and give them the right kind of financial solution, give them the right kind of financing. So I think it's an integrated solution. What we are solving supply chain for them, logistics for them. We are solving financing for them. We are solving selection problem for them. We are solving their working capital management. So and we are solving the pricing aspects of it, giving them lots of transparency through the technology so that they should not feel like, hey, if I'm tier 2 city, I'm not getting the same price as a tier 1 city. So all those bringing those transparency through technology, it's amazing and it's changing. Already, if you'll see in our journey, 4-year and 3-year, especially because we have started virtually like 1 year we have run in the beta. And then we last 3 years, 30 lakh retailers are buying. That's a huge validation and success. And B2B, like B2 small b, it's something has to be solved through the technology, has to build the capabilities.
Correct.
When I say the capabilities like logistics, supply chain, and financing, collection. Because collection is something we cannot say that hey, collection is the most important thing we have to build. But because of the integrated solution, our cost also validates that that makes sense. Yeah, that's where I am. Serene, I hope I have answered your question.
No, very, very valid point that you made. And I think, using data which you get on the platform, I guess makes much more sense than banks having to look for collateral or retailers who are looking for finance, having to worry about providing collateral and so on and so forth. But Amrish, let's talk about the future now. I think it's very, very clear that when it comes to financial technology, India has made a significant amount of progress in being able to deliver on that promise, to bridge the access deficits and really work on the inclusion agenda in the last few years. What do you believe are the big trends or the big changes that we're now on the cusp of? I mean, both in terms of form factor as well, now we're talking about contactless delivery and so on and so forth, but both in terms of product innovations as well as delivery innovations, what would you expect to see over the next few years?
See, on the consumer side, this whole story around JAM, which started off around the Jandan account, mobile and Aadhaar, has definitely given a new identity to the consumer. And consumers are feeling very confident to use their technologies to make payments in the field, to make small purchases, big purchases. Today, I can buy everything from a vada pav to a sandwich on a QR code transaction, which is a very big difference over just 2 years back. There were 2 billion transactions which were done just on UPI in the month of October, which is just amazing change which we are getting to see. Now, what's going to happen with that going forward is just like how you and I can send out WhatsApp messages to each other, we're going to be able to send out WhatsApp payments to each other. And I'm just using WhatsApp out there. I think the bigger point I'm trying to make is money will move like messages. What that is going to do is it's going to take out the inefficiency of money movement for small consumers, for small businesses. Even money between 2 large businesses can move instantly. RBI has already announced RTGS will now run for 24 hours. Yeah. But even before that, with UPI and with card-based payments, we were getting there. So that's on the consumer side. On the merchant side, you've got to remember that the guy who's now running a merchant store is actually a millennial. Now that individual wants to leave his store for the children in a completely different way than the way he inherited it. Now, that person fully understands that they need to automate, digitize, get into digital payments now, or their business is going to struggle when it comes to the large online e-commerce businesses. And we are getting to see the change. Through the COVID days, in the month of September, which is nowhere near Diwali, we deployed about 20,000 terminals only in that month all across India.
Now that's just some amazing. And before COVID, we were doing about 11,000, 11,500 terminalization. That's gone to 20,000. Merchants are saying, if I need to compete, I need to digitize. Let me start with digital payments first.
Absolutely. Let's talk on the other issue that we just heard there from Amrish. The other big trend that we're likely to see emerge and gain momentum is the global aspiration of Indian startups. How big do you believe that space is going to be, and what would it mean for a company like yours?
So I think there are two ways in which our global aspirations would be solved for, right? One is a very direct sort of a way when you start entering into another country and therefore say that, look, this model now goes to country X, country Y, and so on and so forth. The other way is when somebody looks at our model and says, hey, you know what, I'm going to basically tie up with you, or I'm going to, take your business model and put it into my country because I know my country and, can we be partners instead? I think given all the sort of, challenges that we have with globalization, I'm sure you'll do a series on whether we are sort of deglobalizing as a direct economy globally. But I think that both sorts of expansion of the footprint of companies like Swiggy will definitely happen. Already there are many, many examples of where our business models have been taken and reapplied, or specific projects have been taken and reapplied in various countries. Brazil has done so. I keep having conversations with Russia, with some of their food delivery players. So the fact that our business model has merit in so many other countries and we are directly or indirectly applying this is going to be a place where ideas are not brought in here for tweaking and application, but ideas are also created here for tweaking and reapplication in those markets.
Oh, absolutely, that India could emerge as the incubator of ideas and business models that will be exported. That is certainly something that we've started to see happen, and we hope we will see much more of that. Amrish, I'm going to ask you, for a lot of young startups who are going to be watching this, looking at, when they look at your stories on television, they see all the good stuff. They don't see the blood, sweat and tears that goes into getting you onto television and being able to share your story here. So what is your advice to people who are looking at starting up in India today?
So there are two sets of people that I would love to communicate to, right? One is those who are coming out of college. I think the fresh graduate coming out of college, I would just like to say that don't think that this is going to be very easy. Don't think that this is a Bollywood movie wherein you're just going to turn up in a startup and the startup is going to be the most successful one in the country. There's lots of hard work. There's lots of pain for the younger generation getting into the startup world. But the hours you spend building something which you can truly say is yours and you made an impact on it, that feeling is just fantastic. You don't fall for the glamour or don't fall for the financial outcome for it. Follow the experience and life journeys that you're going to enjoy once you get into the startup world. So that's one piece. The second set that I would like to communicate to is those who want to get into the startup world at a later stage, might be in great corporate jobs, might be in a situation where they want to experience something different. There's never a better time than today to get into entrepreneurship in India. Do the basics right, keep yourself debt light, be very, very positive in your approach when you get into a startup world. I think the startup world has a lot to offer to experience an experienced individual, and outcomes can still be fantastic. One of the recent reports is saying that some of the best startups were created at 40 plus when it comes to founders. I think there's lots which a classic employee from a Wipro or an Infosys or Emphasis getting into the startup world can offer, can deliver to. So I think this wave of entrepreneurship is really open for everybody in India today.
Well, never a better time to start up. So if you haven't, then look at the possibility of taking the plunge. But remember, laser sharp focus is the need of the hour, and it's going to require lots of hard work, lots of long hours. Vivek and Sujit, in 10 seconds exactly, Vivek, I'll start by asking you, Amrish talked about how many people imagine this to be glamorous and almost like a Bollywood movie that you're going to decide to take the plunge one day and suddenly you'll have $1 billion valuation. And it doesn't turn out that way. So what's the final words that you'd leave entrepreneurs with?
Have a network. have a network of friends and people who can help you, because it is painful. So if you have a network, that'll help. I mean, 10 seconds, that's the best advice I can give.
That is good advice. Have a network, because it is lonely at the top very often. Sujit, over to you.
I think it should be your passion. Have a team, good team, have a trusted guys in initial phase, have a good advisor, create those needs for yourself. Go by small, not thinking like, okay, in a year I have to achieve that.
Absolutely. So purpose, passion, perseverance, focusing on the journey and not just the destination. That's the approach that one should have. And I keep saying this, you know, chase value, don't chase valuation. And I think the panel that we brought you today are examples of people who've really stuck to what they've believed in. They're passionate about what they do, and they have become unicorns eventually, but that's not what drove them to start up. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on the League of Unicorns. We wish you and your teams the very best of luck. Appreciate you joining us here on this special Indiathon.
India's startup boom is, in a sense, of continuance of exemplary business leadership over the years. Businesses and brands built by those with passion and resilience. And with that, it's a wrap on ITC Presents Swabhiman Bharat Indiathon, a Network 18 initiative. Lots more in the offing in the coming weeks. Stay tuned.